Elvis Presley walked onto the stage thinking he'd done everything. But on June 5, 1972, inside the Las Vegas Hilton, Tom Jones stepped out of the shadows and joined him mid-set. Two icons. One microphone. What happened next stunned the crowd. And what Tom revealed years later changed how the world remembers both men. Las Vegas glittered like liquid gold that night. The Hilton's showroom, packed to the rafters, held almost 20,000 people. The chandeliers burned white, reflecting off the sequins of Elvis's new Phoenix pattern jumpsuit. The scent of cigars, hairspray, and champagne hung thick in the air. Backstage, the TCB band ran a final riff while Joe Esposito checked his watch. 5 minutes. Elvis adjusted his collar, looked in the mirror, and muttered, "Let's give him church." When the house lights dimmed, the crowd erupted. Flashbulbs popped like firecrackers. Elvis stepped into the spotlight, guitar slung low, eyes alive. He opened with CC Rider, hips swaying, every move timed to the beat of history. The Hilton trembled beneath applause. But in the left-hand wing, another legend waited. Tom Jones, fresh from his own Caesar's run, had slipped in quietly with a grin and a black velvet suit. He and Elvis had met years earlier in L.A., two Southern boys turned global idols, but never shared a stage. Until now, midway through the third song, Tom leaned toward the stagehand. "Tell him I'm here." The message reached Joe Esposito, who froze. "Tonight." Tom nodded. "If he'll have me." Joe hurried to Elvis between numbers, whispering fast. Elvis raised an eyebrow, then smiled slow. "Well, bring the Welshman up." The band's brass section straightened. The audience had no clue what was about to happen. The curtain on stage left fluttered, and Tom Jones strode out. The spotlight snapped to him. The roar that followed sounded like thunder rolling through marble. Elvis laughed mid-note, almost losing the lyric. He extended his hand. Tom took it. Two worlds collided. Vegas showmanship and British soul swagger. The crowd went feral. People leapt onto chairs, screaming both names. Reporters in the back scrambled for cameras. Tom leaned into Elvis's mic. "Mind if I borrow this, King?" Elvis grinned. "Only if you can keep up, boy." The band exploded into a blues jam. Tom's voice cut through the brass. Raw, rich, daring. Elvis countered, matching him riff for riff. The Hilton's glass panels quivered under the sound. Joe Esposito whispered to the lighting tech, "We're witnessing a legend inside a legend." On stage, sweat gleamed under the spotlights as both men laughed mid-verse, testing each other, respecting each other. The energy felt unscripted, alive. For one shimmering moment, Vegas wasn't about money or fame, it was about music. Elvis looked at Tom and thought, so this is what it feels like to share the throne. The final chord struck. The crowd stood as one. The curtain fell halfway, but the story was just beginning. The roar hadn't faded when Tom took a half-step forward. Elvis wiped sweat from his brow, still laughing. "That was wild, brother." Tom's voice dropped to a whisper that the front row barely caught. "Let me try something." Elvis blinked. "Now?" Tom nodded. The crowd sensed the shift instantly, the playful energy snapping into suspense. The orchestra froze, hands hovering above brass and strings. He turned to the audience. "I didn't plan this," he said, grinning. "But I've waited years for a chance like tonight." He extended his hand toward Elvis. "Mind if I borrow the mic?" A ripple of gasps moved through the Hilton ballroom. No one borrowed Elvis Presley's microphone, not even another headliner. For a long second, Elvis just stared at him. The stage lights reflected off the diamond cross at his throat. Then the corner of his mouth lifted. He offered the mic handle first. "Go on, Tom. Let's see what you've got." The crowd exploded again. But beneath the cheers, tension shimmered like heat on asphalt. Elvis had just surrendered control of his own stage. Tom tilted the mic, testing the echo. The band looked to Joe Esposito, who shrugged helplessly. "Play if he moves," Joe mouthed. Tom started softly, a cappella. "Love Me Tonight." The melody rolled out smooth and dangerous, each note wrapping around the room. Elvis folded his arms, head bowed, listening. By the second verse, the orchestra joined in automatically, no cue, just instinct. Brass bloomed, drums whispered. Tom's voice filled every inch of the Hilton. Elvis's smile faded to something quieter. Respect. When the chorus hit, he stepped beside Tom again. Without warning, he joined in harmony, his baritone sliding under Tom's tenor like velvet under steel. Two voices, one frequency. The crowd went silent, stunned by the blend. So different, yet perfectly aligned. Halfway through, Elvis raised his hands, stopping the band cold. "Hold it," he said. He turned to Tom. "Let's take it from the bridge your way." Tom nodded, eyes shining. They hit the line together, no arrangement, no rehearsal, pure electricity. When the final note soared, the audience detonated. People were crying, laughing, hugging strangers. Backstage, a stagehand whispered, "Did we just watch a challenge or a confession? Maybe both." Elvis leaned into the mic, voice steady but soft. "Ladies and gentlemen, give that man the crown for one song." Tom laughed, shaking his head. "You keep it, King. I'm just visiting." The band struck a victory chord. Lights burst white. In the crowd's roar, one thought echoed. Who really owned the night? The challenger, or the one brave enough to share his throne? The Hilton stage was vibrating with aftershock. Every light in the rig seemed brighter, every heartbeat faster. The band's horns were slick with condensation. The crowd still on its feet, chanting both names. "Elvis, Tom, Elvis, Tom." Backstage, Joe Esposito ran a hand through his hair. "We're off script now," he muttered to the sound tech. The answer came back through static. "Then let it roll." Elvis turned to Tom with a grin that didn't quite hide the challenge. "You want to keep going?" Tom nodded. "If you can handle another round." The drummer counted them in. 1, 2, 3. The brass kicked. The guitars roared. They launched into Proud Mary. Neither had rehearsed it together. Elvis took the first verse, swagger and grit. Tom followed with the second, voice like gravel dipped in honey. The crowd lost its mind. But under the spotlights, something shifted. What had started as mutual admiration began to feel like a duel. Each voice rose higher, sharper, louder. Elvis hit a growl that shook the ceiling tiles. Tom answered with a shout that cracked clear through the brass. A pattern-breaker moment. Two legends. One mic total hush. The orchestra faltered, unsure who to follow. Elvis signaled keep playing. Tom winked, daring him to outsing the next line. By the bridge, sweat poured down both their faces. The audience could sense the tension, half respect, half rivalry. This wasn't scripted Vegas polish anymore. It was primal, raw. From the front row, a journalist scribbled in frantic shorthand. "This is not a duet. It's combat in rhythm." Elvis stepped closer, their shoulders almost touching. "You're pushing me, boy," he said through clenched teeth, but he was smiling. Tom fired back. "That's the point." The band hit a breakdown. The bass thumped like a heartbeat. Elvis leaned into the mic. "Rollin', rollin', rollin' on the river." Tom cut in, harmonizing a half-step above him. The room shook. Lights flared so bright the front row shielded their eyes. Then Elvis did something unexpected. He dropped his voice low, almost whispering, letting Tom take the lead. Instantly, the tension melted into something new. Trust. He clapped his hands, shouted, "Take it, brother." Tom closed his eyes and unleashed the final chorus, full power, no restraint. The crowd erupted before the song even ended. The two men collapsed into laughter, gripping each other's arms as the last chord rang out. Backstage, Joe exhaled. They nearly burned the place down. When the curtain fell for intermission, Elvis looked at Tom and said, "I ain't been pushed like that in years." Tom replied, "That's 'cause nobody's ever stood this close." They both laughed, exhausted, glowing. The ego was still there, but so was respect. And somewhere inside the smoke and spotlights, both men knew. They hadn't just sung a song. They'd tested the edge of legend and survived it. The intermission lasted only 10 minutes, but the crowd never sat down. They were still buzzing, talking over each other, trying to explain what they'd just seen. Two legends had collided and somehow the sky hadn't cracked. Backstage, Elvis paced in front of the mirror. His reflection looked like electricity in human form. Eyes bright, hair plastered with sweat. Joe Esposito handed him a towel. "You all right, boss?" Elvis nodded, catching his breath. "He can sing, Joe. Damn, he can sing." Across the hall, Tom Jones leaned against a piano, sipping water, still grinning. A stagehand approached. "You're not done, are you?" Tom laughed. "Not if the king wants another round." When the stage lights blinked twice, it meant the next act was ready. Elvis and Tom walked out together this time, side by side. The crowd saw it and lost control. Elvis raised his hands. "You mind if we make a little history tonight?" The band froze mid-note. Tom tilted his head. "You mean right now?" Elvis smiled. "Why wait?" Then he turned to the orchestra. "Give me E major." The first chords rolled out, slow, familiar, dangerous. The opening to It's Not Unusual. The audience gasped. Tom looked stunned. "You know this one?" Elvis winked. "Heard it once or twice." Tom burst out laughing, grabbed the second mic, and joined in. What followed didn't feel rehearsed. It felt spiritual. Short bursts of rhythm. He breathes. He reaches. He lets go. Their voices collided like thunder meeting silk. Elvis leaned into the low harmony, grounding Tom's soaring notes. Tom shot back with riffs that made the horns blush. Every word landed like a spark. The camera flashes strobed across their faces. Each note felt alive, shared, dangerous. At one point, Tom stepped behind Elvis and sang harmony over his shoulder. Elvis laughed mid-line, nearly breaking character, but the sound came out pure. Raw joy disguised as performance. Then something miraculous happened. They hit a line together, perfect pitch, same breath, same heartbeat. The sound that burst from those speakers wasn't Elvis or Tom. It was both. The crowd went silent, stunned by what they'd heard. Elvis looked sideways, eyes wide. "Did you feel that?" he whispered. Tom nodded. "We're not singing anymore. We're in it." For a few seconds, they forgot the cameras, the contracts, the glitter. It was just two men sharing the same air, the same rhythm, the same awe. When the final chorus hit, the Hilton shook. People stood on tables. Security let it happen. Even the hotel staff clapped in the aisles. The song ended in one clean, perfect note. The two men held it, breath trembling, then let it fall into silence. No one moved. No one dared. Elvis turned, grinning. "Now that," he said softly, "wasn't in the script." The crowd exploded again, and in that roar, two egos vanished, replaced by a single sound called belonging. The applause still thundered as the curtain dropped. Backstage, the hallway smelled of sweat, leather, and burning stage lights. Crew members moved around in a daze. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something that would live far beyond the Hilton. Elvis was the first to speak. "Joe," he said, still breathless. "Get Tom in here." Moments later, Tom Jones pushed through the doorway, jacket undone, shirt collar soaked. They both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes only when two storms finally calm. "Brother," Elvis said, clapping his shoulder. "You nearly blew my rhinestones off." Tom grinned. "You made me work for every note." Between them sat a silver tray of champagne glasses no one touched. The air carried the hum of adrenaline cooling into friendship. Joe Esposito leaned on the doorframe, watching silently. He knew Elvis didn't let many people this close after a show. Elvis reached for a white scarf from the dressing room table, the one he'd worn during Suspicious Minds earlier that night. "This belongs with you," he said, holding it out. "For singing like that." Tom shook his head. "You keep it, King." But Elvis wouldn't. He pressed it into Tom's palm. "Take it. You earned it." Tom hesitated, then pulled something from his own bag. A small vinyl disc in a brown sleeve. A bootleg recording of the night, captured straight from the Hilton's soundboard. He'd had it made quietly by a friend in the tech crew. He scribbled on the label with a felt-tip pen. "To the King, June 5, 1972. He handed it over. A trade, he said. Proof it happened. Elvis studied the record, thumb tracing the inscription. This is better than gold. Joe smiled in the corner. You two just bought yourselves immortality. They both laughed, but under the humor was a quiet truth. Something irreversible had shifted. The rivalry was gone. Elvis set the record gently in his guitar case. Next time we plan it, he said. Tonight was lightning. Next one's thunder. Tom nodded. You call me, I'll come running. The room fell silent again, just the hum of the amplifiers cooling outside. Elvis leaned back, whispering more to himself than anyone. Funny how sharing a song can change a man. Tom met his eyes. Maybe that's the point of it. Joe turned off the light. The hallway echoed with their laughter fading into stillness. Behind that closed door, a friendship had begun. One built not on fame, but on harmony. Decades passed. The Hilton stage that once blazed like a crown jewel had been remodeled, renamed, and wrapped in history. But people still talked about that night, the handshake, the scarf, the impossible duet. In 1999, during a quiet interview on BBC Radio, Tom Jones was asked about Elvis. The room went still before he answered. His voice softened. He sang that song for me, he said. Not for the crowd. For me. The host leaned forward. You mean, during It's Not Unusual? Tom smiled. No. After the cameras stopped, he asked the band to keep playing. No one saw it, just us and a few crew. He turned and said, This one's yours. Then he sang Can't Help Falling in Love. Slow. Bore. Like a confession. The tape of that impromptu moment never surfaced, but the story did. Fans flooded radio stations with letters, some disbelieving, others in tears. Reporters dug through archives until one found a Hilton invoice dated June 5, 1972. After-show rehearsal, 15 minutes. Handwritten beside it were the words, Private Jones. Elvis had once told Joe Esposito, When I sing alone, I pray through the music. When I sing with Tom, I talk. Years later, Tom repeated those words on stage in Cardiff. The king taught me the difference between fame and faith, he told the crowd of 15,000. He sang as if the world could break at any moment, and sometimes it did. Short sentences carried weight. Simple truth. No embellishment. In the Las Vegas Hilton lobby, a plaque appeared in 2005. June 5, 1972, two voices became one. Tourists walk past it daily, few realizing it marks the only night Elvis ever shared a lead microphone on his own stage. Tom once visited the hotel years after its renovation. Standing in the empty lounge, he said to a journalist, You can still feel him here. He touched the railing near the stage, whispering, We burned this floor together. When asked what shocked him most about that night, Tom didn't hesitate. His generosity. Everyone called him the king, but that night, he bowed to me. There it was, the revelation that rewrote the myth. The king of rock and roll didn't lose the crown, he shared it. That's the piece fans rarely hear. The humility behind the legend, the grace behind the glitter. Sometimes history hides its truest note between songs. And maybe that's why people still return to that story, not for the fame, but for the moment two giants remembered they were men. By the mid-70s, both men were legends in their own right. Tom Jones had become the roaring lion of British showmanship. Elvis Presley, the eternal symbol of American music. But privately, both carried the memory of one June night when the spotlight belonged to neither. In interviews, Tom never called it a duet. He called it a reminder. Elvis didn't have to share that stage, he once said. But he did. That's how I knew he was bigger than his crown. Elvis, too, would mention it quietly backstage years later. Joe Esposito remembered hearing him say, When I stood next to that boy, I didn't feel older. I felt alive. Ego had no place in that sentence. It had melted away under stage lights long ago. During rehearsals in 1974, Elvis brought out that same bootleg vinyl Tom had given him. He held it up to the TCB band. This right here, he said, is what music's supposed to sound like, two people lifting each other instead of trying to win. That simple phrase turned into a kind of code for the band. Whenever a guest musician joined them, someone would whisper, "Lift him up, Hilton 72, pattern breaker." A rivalry turned into a reference for generosity. Tom later told audiences, "If you want to honor someone, don't imitate them. Harmonize with them." That's what Elvis had done. As the years rolled on, their friendship outlasted fame. They would meet occasionally in quiet rooms, no cameras, no press. Sometimes they didn't even sing. They'd just talk about family, about the pressure of keeping audiences believing in miracles. Elvis once said, "We're all chasing applause, but that's not what feeds you." Tom replied, "Then what does?" Elvis smiled. "The moments when you stop chasing and start sharing." That answer became the moral of their story. When Elvis passed in 1977, Tom refused to perform that week. He flew to Memphis, placed the white scarf on the steps of Graceland, and said nothing. The fans who saw him there didn't need words. A photographer snapped a single frame. Tom kneeling, scarf folded, head bowed. The photo became an emblem of respect, printed worldwide with the caption, "Unity over ego." Looking back, Tom said, "We were different as day and night, but for 4 minutes in Vegas, we were one sound." And that's how history should remember them. Not as competitors, but as proof that even the loudest voices can meet in harmony. Because sometimes the greatest note a legend can hit is silence shared in understanding. The story of that night at the Las Vegas Hilton never really ended. It echoed through vinyl static, whispered interviews, and half-remembered fan letters. Each retelling added another shimmer to a moment that felt too perfect to fade. Every generation has its defining duet, moments when music becomes more than entertainment. But June 5, 1972 wasn't about fame or sales or charts. It was about two men letting the walls fall, if only for one song. And somehow that honesty keeps replaying. Watch the footage closely, the rare grainy clip that circulates online. You'll see it. The grin, the shoulder bump, the unspoken thank you. Every gesture says more than lyrics ever could. People comment under the video even now. You can feel the respect. This is how legends behave. Wish music still sounded this real. Because what Tom revealed later, that Elvis sang for him, not for the crowd, wasn't just confession. It was a lesson. A reminder that greatness isn't about how high you climb. It's about who you lift while you're up there. In the Hilton lobby today, that small brass plaque still catches the afternoon sun. June 5, 1972, two voices became one. Tourists stop, take photos, read the engraving aloud, then move on. But once in a while someone lingers. Maybe they remember hearing their parents play that record. Maybe they've stood on their own stage, trying to find balance between ambition and grace. One fan, a young musician from Texas, once left a folded note beneath the plaque. It read, "Thank you for reminding me that music isn't competition. It's communion." That's the ripple. That's legacy. When Tom Jones talks about Elvis now, his tone changes. Slower, quieter, as if speaking a prayer. He never stopped being generous, he said in a 2010 interview. He wanted everyone to feel seen. Even on stage, under blinding lights, he'd look straight at you and make you feel like you belonged. Maybe that's why the story keeps circling back online, because people crave that kind of authenticity in a world that moves too fast to feel. If you close your eyes, you can still hear it. The hum of amplifiers, the breath before harmony, the single heartbeat shared between two microphones. It's not nostalgia. It's truth replaying itself. And maybe that's what this story is really asking us. Who could you share your spotlight with? Who deserves a verse in your song? The king and the voice answered that question the only way that mattered, by giving each other room to shine. So if this story stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone chasing their own stage. Tag a friend who loves old music. Tell them what happens when ego turns into empathy, when icons choose harmony over pride. Because on June 5, 1972, inside that golden room in Las Vegas, two men proved one truth that still sings half a century later. When legends listen, history finds its voice.